What do you see as the sort of challenges for moorland at the moment?
Well, I think the main challenge for moorland is that it's not actually valued. In the old days, people talked about the fantastic highland landscape, and the moors and the hills and the heather. Nowadays, that's been subsumed by the woodland lobby, and everybody talks about there should be trees here and woodland is the best thing, and moorland gets disparaged because there's socially shooting interests. So it's not accepted in its own right as a true Scottish landscape, and because of that, it's under tremendous threat from conversion to woodland and forest.
Yeah. I mean, and do you see that threat happening more? I mean, there seems to be more land being purchased for, for carbon credits, etc. And I mean, what's your sort of take on that?
It's everywhere you go in the Highlands, you see new forests being put in. And there's so much money being thrown at it by the government and Forest Commission, and climate change, trees seem to be a good thing for climate change. Unfortunately, much of the Highland soils are organic rich, either peats or shallow peats or topsoils, with a very high carbon content. And it's not obvious that planting trees on those will actually benefit the climate. So I think we need to take all the climate change issues or justification of tree planting with a pinch of salt, particularly if you take into account the reduced albedo, or the way that trees absorb heat, whereas open moorland tends to reflect heat, so you get local warming from tree planting. But everybody has leapt onto the bandwagon, and trees are the answer to everything. They stop floods, they help the climate, they're good for aesthetics, they're good for biodiversity, whatever that means, and they're good for recreation. And you can't say a thing against them. And the tree lobby is all-encompassing and all-powerful. It's a juggernaut, and nobody stops to think about it. And I think what people don't understand is the history of the Scottish landscape and its vegetation. And looked at from an historical perspective, there's no evidence of widespread on a huge scale of clearance of woodland in Scotland. It's a natural landscape, one of the most natural landscapes in Europe, and it's been damaged by all the push for woodland.
Does it sadden you that, it looks as if we're going to continue to lose moorland?
I get very depressed driving around the Highlands. I mean, I can remember in the old days you could drive to the watershed of Scotland when I was young without seeing a fence. Now everywhere you go you see fence plantations and deer fences and mounding. Even up the A9 they've gone on forestry ploughed right opposite Dalnacarloch, up the A9 right opposite on the edge of the national park. And forestry ploughing must be one of the most destructive practices going. It releases soil carbon, that's why it happens to release nutrients. It goes through all the archaeology, vegetation, water courses, and it's irreversible change, making landscapes stripier, whatever you do in the future. And that's happening now, all for the sake of planting trees.
What else do you think needs to happen in terms of protecting our moorland areas? Because when you authored the 2015 SGA Commission paper on moorland, you argued then that there needed to be a locational strategy and that we needed to plan out the areas that we should keep as core areas. Do you think that will ever happen?
Nothing's ever changed. That's absolutely needed. I'm a bit pessimistic. The powers that be aren't interested particularly in moorland, and I think currently shooting has a bad press, especially grouse shooting in conservation circles, and I think unnecessarily bad. I'm not saying I approve of all shooting practices, but without grouse shooting, I think if shooting is too hard by the regulations, it might just all go to Sitka spruce plantation, which is the worst possible thing for the environment from the nature conservation. And I think the debate is too polarised. There needs the keeping fraternity, the conservation fraternity, the conservationists need to talk more. And I think there's some people who really just enjoy sort of being negative and everything keepers do being bad. And that needs, well, that's the case. And while they seem to have all the popular press as shooting being bad, then I don't think there's much hope for Scottish moorland anymore. So I think we need to talk to each other and not just blame each other for hammer and tongs. There's wrong on both sides.